Welcome to WiseTake.com. This is CK013. You can find me on Twitter at CK_013. And yes, we are bringing you another NBA DFS podcast. It is Wednesday, March 22nd, 2017. We've got another 8-game slate. We got another Westbrook slate. I know the podcast is coming out a little late. I know I normally like to do it the night before. However, it was really good friend of mine from Phoenix. I told you guys was here. It was his birthday yesterday, so we had to go out and do our thing, celebrate a little bit. And I didn't want to give you guys a podcast while I was intoxicated, so we decided to wait till the morning. And don't forget, we also have WiseTakeLIVE later today at 5:30 p.m. We've been having some pretty good shows lately. We have had a bunch of you guys have been coming in at the 5:30 sign-in, and you guys have been great participating, asking questions. We like questions. Is what we're there for. I ask questions. You guys ask questions. We all ask questions. We all talk a little bit, try to get some strategies together or whatnot. So it's a great time. So 5:30 p.m. Eastern, check back to the YouTube channel, the WiseTake YouTube channel, that is, and make sure that you check in with us a little bit. And join WiseTake Live. The streaming is usually 10 minutes prior. We allow you to start streaming. All you'll see is a stream starting soon, streaming, and at 5:30 on the dot, we start up the show, and it's usually a good time. Like I said, there's a chat feature on there. It's a live show. You can ask me any questions. I ask you guys some questions sometimes, try to figure out what you guys like. Even maybe I can get some ideas from you guys. So I think it's a phenomenal thing, and like I said, it returns every Wednesday, guys. Every Wednesday. Well, maybe not every Wednesday, but most Wednesdays. I can tell you right now, there's a couple Wednesdays coming up where there will not be a live show. At least not on the YouTube channel. We might do a Periscope at some point in a couple weeks. I'm going to South Carolina on literally the last week of March. So, I think the last day of March actually. So, anyway, that's still down the road. This week there is WiseTake Live. It's tonight. So I really appreciate if you guys joined us there. Anyway. So last night, somehow I ended up pretty overweight on Zach Randolph. I know you're probably asking why or how. He didn't do well, and he started off red hot, and then he just went cold. But I figured they'd need him on the court against Boogie, and I guess that wasn't the route they went. I think they ended up using a little bit more of JaMychal Green than I would have expected. And that's my fault. I should have paid attention. He was cheaper anyway, and there was a lot of people talking about JaMychal Green a little bit. I wouldn't say a lot of people, but I did hear his name a couple times. And for some reason, you know what it is? I ran the court IQ numbers and roto grinders and roto grinders, and I checked a bunch of stuff. Oh, by the way, if you can't tell, I'm still sick. I'm pretty congested. Anyway, I ran a couple of numbers to see what would happen when Tony Allen was out and a couple other guys, whoever else was out. And it said that Zebo was the one that got the bump. So in playing time and usage. So from what I saw, he was supposed to get around a 30% usage. That was not the case. And it was a tougher matchup. It was a very slow-paced game. But anyway, he wasn't the only person that I made a mistake on. I did not do well yesterday. I'll admit that. So, things have been rough for me lately. I'm going to admit that. It's funny. I feel like on the podcast, I've given out some pretty good, some solid plays. But for some reason, when it comes down to playing them, I'm not playing a lot of these guys that I like on the pod. So maybe I just got to listen to myself a little bit more. That's what I've been saying to Fuego Steve. Because even us, on the podcast we're on together even, we typically give out some pretty fire information, and yet somehow we don't end up playing all the guys that we said were going to play the night before. And, I think a lot of it is just not enough lineups to fit everybody in. There's a lot of people you like, and these slates are larger, so there's more options and more opportunities for these kind of things. But yeah, so we got to turn this around. And, I got to turn this around. Hopefully you guys are doing well because you're listening to the podcast. Anyway, we're going to dive right in. We've got 8 games, and like I said, we got Westbrook on the slate today. He's the only, when I say only, I mean there's no Harden, basically is what I'm saying. Anyway, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist is probable with an ankle at Orlando. Felicio for the Bulls is questionable with a back against Detroit. Meanwhile, Robin Lopez is expected to be out for suspension against Detroit. I don't know if you guys saw that. That was pretty crazy. He threw a full-on, he took a real swing at Ibaka. Ibaka swung back, so he'll probably be suspended too. But Lopez took a legit swing at him. So he said himself he's expecting to be suspended. So I think all of us would be surprised if he wasn't suspended at this point. So that'll be interesting for value. Felicio is somebody you could look to for value, but if he's questionable, if he's hurt, you're gonna have to pay attention to see who starts. I think it's at 8 o'clock, or no, maybe not. Maybe not 8 o'clock. I'm not sure. I'm gonna check the game time on that real quick. Yeah, it's 8 p.m. Eastern start time. So we may not get that information until the last minute. It's possible. I'm assuming that Felicio and Joffrey would be the guys getting some run there. But Felicio's questionable with the back. I know he did get hurt in the game yesterday. So we'll be very curious. If you want to play Westbrook today, you're going to have to pay close attention to that situation because there's not too much value to the naked eye just yet. Obviously, we know Dwayne Wade is out for the season with his elbow. Jahlil Okafor is questionable with a knee at Oklahoma City. Bazemore is out with a knee at Washington. Millsap out with a knee at Washington. Dunleavy is probable with an ankle at Washington. Not exactly moving the needle there. Tristan Thompson is probable with a mouth injury he sustained in his last contest at Denver. Kyle Korver is questionable with a foot at Denver. Wilson Chandler is questionable with a groin versus Cleveland. Danilo Gallinari is doubtful with his knee versus Cleveland. Obviously, Daryl Arthur, I believe, is out for the season now. Aaron Aflalo and McLemore are both questionable with personal reasons versus Milwaukee. Tyreek Evans is questionable with an ankle versus Milwaukee. Shelvin Mack is questionable with an ankle against the Knicks. And Derek Favors is out against the Knicks. So there you go. So there's quite a bit of injury news for an 8-game slate, and we still don't know everything. There's a lot of questionables, right? Like we don't exactly know what to expect, and it's a situation we have some pretty interesting guys to pay up for today. We've got obviously Russell Westbrook is 13-1, coming off a serious dud against Golden State. I find it very, very hard to believe that he won't. Excuse me. I told you I'm really sick. Westbrook is coming off probably the worst game of his career, so I'd be very surprised to not see him bounce back. Now it is against Philly. Philly's been they've been a little weird. They've been playing pretty well for the most part, but occasionally they still get blown out. Oklahoma City, they're a good team. Meaning they have Westbrook. But at 13-1, you're probably going to want to play him. I don't think I'm going to. As Fuego Steve always says, if you're making one lineup, I wouldn't fade him. If you're making multiple lineups, then maybe you can do one with, one without. But I definitely wouldn't fade him completely, especially not coming off of that game where he completely dudded. And considering that Philly's not very good at protecting the rim, Westbrook shouldn't have to rely on his outside shot too much. He should be able to get to the rim whenever he need please. Obviously, assists to Adams and Cantor are definitely in play against Philly's bad defense, but we'll talk about them later. But yeah, Westbrook, phenomenal play, phenomenal spot. He burned the world the other day, and I wonder if that's going to drive down his ownership. Probably not, because that was, if you look at his game logs, that was by far the worst game he's had, at least in his last 10 games, and probably in the entire season. That was pretty bad. Last time he played Philly, he did get 61.5 DraftKings points. Shot 11 for 21 from the field. 11 free throws. He got fouled a lot. He played 36.2 minutes. So probably another good spot for the Westbrook, of course. Anyway, John Wall is at home against Atlanta. He's 9,300. It seems like a phenomenal spot for Wall. Now, Wall hasn't been showing his ceiling all that much recently. He's been under 10K for 4 games in a row. This is the 5th game in a row he's been under 10K. The price is tempting because we know he's got Westbrook upside. Well, when I say Westbrook upside, he doesn't have the same ceiling as Westbrook. Westbrook's ceiling is what, like 80? I don't think John Wall has an 80-point ceiling, but I think he does have obviously he's shown us he could put up 60. So if you want to take a chance, his matchup is phenomenal. It really is against Atlanta. I love targeting guards, point guards especially, but shooting guards also against Washington. I say that all the time. Washington's favored by 7 in this game, so it should stay close for most of the game. Although with Atlanta, you got to be careful. Atlanta seems either they're gonna play well and stay in the game the whole time, or they're gonna get blown out. They get blown out a fair amount considering that they're not supposed to be that bad of a team. They're not that great of a team. What are they? Yeah, 37 and 33. So 4 games above 500. They're not that great, but Washington has been on a roll lately. So, yeah, I definitely like John Wall at 9,300 as an alternative to Westbrook. Now, they played 3 games against Atlanta this season, and Wall is averaging 41.9 DraftKings points. He hasn't really shot well against Atlanta, which is strange. But I know Schroeder, whatever, he struggles particularly against bigger guards, and I would classify him as a bigger point guard. So I would expect Wall to have a big game today. I don't think he's as safe as Westbrook, obviously, but like I said, in a GPP, if you want similar upside, while saving almost $4,000 on DraftKings, I get it. Giannis backing up a back-to-back for him. He's 9,200. They got a matchup with Sacramento. I'm liking the price, but we've seen that his upside has been fairly limited for the most part with Chris Middleton back. I was a little surprised. I was a little surprised at the line in this game. It's only 3.5. Milwaukee's only favored by 3.5, which means it should stay fairly close. One thing I like about Giannis is you can play him at small forward, a position that's typically ugly, although today we do have some more options. But he's got a matchup with Sacramento. I don't really see anybody stopping him here. I know like Sacramento hasn't been the greatest defensive team since Boogie left, and even Tyreek Evans, he's questionable. We don't know if he's playing. He's probably one of the better defenders, but even so, he's typically limited in minutes anyway. So, and I don't think he's matching up with Giannis, to be honest. So I think the Greek Freak's in a great spot at 9,200. Let's see. He played 25 minutes against Sacramento, and the first time they met, he still got 47 DraftKings points. That was only in 25 minutes. So if he gets his standard 35, 36 minutes, he could definitely do some damage here. So I think he's definitely worth considering. That game with Portland that they had, that was very low scoring. I was very surprised. He got 42 DraftKings points. But, I would hope for something better. I certainly would, but they've been on a road for a while now. Definitely on a long road trip. Giannis certainly in play, of course. Jimmy Butler backing up a back-to-back, 8,900. We know he's been a usage beast, and against Toronto, 67.5 DraftKings points. I think we got some overtime to thank for that one. That was probably my biggest mistake of the day, is I did not play Jimmy Butler. Initially I had him in my lineup. When I made my cash game lineup, I initially did have Butler in there. For some reason, I changed it out. I don't even remember really why. Now, I wasn't predicting an overtime, nor the score. I mean, this was one of the lowest totals on the night, and all of a sudden, there you go. They both just went nuts, and it's just crazy. What was it, 242 points, I think, were scored? That was just crazy. And DeRozan and Butler both went off. It was a great game to watch. I didn't watch much of it, but from the highlights I saw, it looked great. But I made that mistake. I didn't play Butler. And I think today people are going to go back to the well with Butler, and it's another pace-down spot. He's coming off an overtime game. He shot pretty well. He shot 52.4% from the field yesterday. I don't know if I'm expecting that in the back end of a back-to-back after overtime. So I know it's kind of stinks, but I think I might have to fade that train. But anyway, moving on. I'm going to go back to point guards. I don't know why I jumped over to Butler. I think I was looking at I was kind of going over all the studs. Anyway, back to point guards. Kyrie Irving, 8,600 with a matchup in Denver. Seems like a dream matchup, without a doubt. And Kyrie's coming off a massive game against the Lakers. 38 minutes, 54.5 DraftKings points. One person I don't think I mentioned on the injury report, I think Darren Williams is actually questionable. That's something that wasn't on my injury report, but I just remembered. So keep that in mind. If he's out, they might have to rely on Kyrie for some mega minutes there, like the 38 he played against the Lakers. In one game against Denver this season, Kyrie shot 41.7% from the field. He got 44.5 DraftKings points. I definitely think it's a solid play, potentially even for cash because his price isn't so bad at 8,600, considering the matchup he's got against against Denver. So I definitely think Kyrie is interesting. That game in general is very interesting. The spread is pretty close, and I mean, look, they almost lost to the Lakers the other day. So evidently, on the road right now, they are somewhat vulnerable. I wouldn't be surprised to see them come out and stomp, but one or two guys from this game, maybe I could see in cash like a Kyrie. But in GPPs in general, I really like this game. But we'll talk about some of those other plays. Isaiah Thomas, 8,100. Definitely a great price tag for him. However, his upside has also been limited. He's failed to even break 40 DraftKings points in quite a while. So the price is right. Matchup is good against Jeff Teague, but just keep in mind his upside has been limited. But I think IT2 is a pretty sneaky play here. Kemba at Orlando is 8K. We know about his home and road splits. His price continues to be right. But after he had that mega hot run, he's now had 3 straight games where he's kind of dudded. So it's kind of been time to hop off that train. On the other side of the boat, Elf on the shelf, 7,500. His price remains pretty fair considering how well he's been playing. 3 out of his last 4 over 30 DraftKings points, 39.75, 38.5 in his last couple. Now, he's only played 31 minutes in his last 2 contests, 22 against Golden State. That was a blowout. But he's only played 31 minutes in each of his last 2 contests. That's a little concerning. Still, though, I think he remains a pretty solid play, even at 7,500 against Kemba. Excuse me. I know it's probably annoying. Dennis Schroeder, 7,100 against Wall. No, thank you. Jeff Teague is only 6,500 against Boston. Now, I know Teague, Teague seems like he's been trying to wake up a little bit over his last 3 contests, especially against Utah. 40.25 DraftKings points at a 5,900 price tag. That's a pretty great deal. He's back up to 65, but we know what his upside could be. We saw it earlier this season. And in a great matchup against Isaiah Thomas. Now, you do have some concerns because they don't have a dominant shooting guard. They could put Avery Bradley on him. Even so, that would just open up assist opportunities for more players. So I definitely like Teague anyway as an option. George Hill against New York, I don't think I'm going there. Rondo had a massive game yesterday. Let me see what he did. 50.25 DraftKings points. He played 40 minutes against Toronto. They went to overtime. I'm a little surprised he didn't get more than that. But nonetheless, he had a phenomenal game at 5,700. Back end of a back-to-back slower-paced team. I think he's in play still, but I don't like him as much as yesterday, especially coming off of an overtime game where he just played 40 minutes. So I'm a little skeptical about the Bulls in this spot, at least some of the Bulls that did play those mega minutes like Butler and Rondo. Jameer Nelson, 5,600. He was playing great earlier, kind of went dead. Woke up for one game against Houston, went back to the crapper. 3 out of his last 4 games under 30 DraftKings points. The matchup is good, don't get me wrong. But the rotation for Denver is getting a little funky. They put Murillo back in the rotation at some point. So Jameer Nelson, while he has played mega minutes in some games, not every game is that the case. So, for instance, they just played a home-and-home against Houston, and in the first game he played 39 minutes. In the second, he only played 31. So it's a little, kind of up in the air. But certainly a decent punt option, I would say, at point guard, just because it's a high total game, close spread. So it's worth a dart, but he's not exactly somebody I'm dying to target. I think that McConnell against Westbrook is interesting. He's 5,400. My problem with McConnell is we know he doesn't have too much of a ceiling. He's coming off a great game against Orlando, 39.75 DraftKings points, but that's kind of a ceiling there. And he shot 15 shots in that game, which is really unusual for him. In the prior contests he's played, his minutes have kind of dipped a little bit. Against Boston, he played 28 minutes, and against Dallas, he played 22. He did play 34 against Orlando. However, like I said, 39 is probably a ceiling, which isn't bad for 5,400, but there's a lot of pretty good point guards today, as you can already tell. Derrick Rose, 5,400. I like the price. I hate the matchup, but you're getting that Utah discount. His minutes typically have been up recently. His performance has been down, but he's 5,400. So if he gets you 30 DraftKings points, it's not so bad. He's over 5x at that point, right? So that's certainly worth consideration if you're left at a utility position or you have to fill a guard position with 5,400 left. I would consider Rose against Hill. I certainly would. I'm not dying to go there, especially with Rose with Gobert down there. I typically like to play Rose when teams can't defend the rim, and Gobert is obviously one of the best rim protectors in the league, so not dying to go there. Collison and Brogdon, certainly options. You got Ty Lawson, not too interested there. But yeah, we're going to move on to shooting guard from that point. A lot of point guards. We talked about Jimmy Butler a little prematurely, but we did talk about him. Will Barton, 7,500. The only way he's still in play is if Chandler is out. If Chandler's in, Chandler's going to be the guy I like. But Will Barton, his price is up. He's coming off a massive game. I'll probably try to avoid him in tournaments just because I think that if Chandler's out, people are going to be on him again. And it's not a bad play by any means. It's just 7,500 like we saw with Ulis yesterday. Any player is really capable of busting. And the 7,500 for Barton, I think, is a little steep. Now, like I said, if for any reason they say Chandler is out, which he's questionable right now, we know Gallo's supposed to be out, then I guess you have to consider him. Bradley Beal against Atlanta in a great spot, 7,200. If you can't play Wall, he could be a good alternative now. And I will admit he has not been playing well over his last 3 games. All three straight games under 30 DraftKings points. So that's a little concerning. But Atlanta is pretty bad against shooting guards. Nick Batum, 6,900. The price is right. I don't see anybody really who's going to match up with him for Orlando. So I think Batum is a phenomenal play at 6,900. Gary Harris in a great spot. He's getting the minutes. He's been playing phenomenally ever since Denver's accrued those injuries. He's kind of stepped it up. His price is up to 63, which is, I know it's a little up, but it's coming off a great game against Houston. Cleveland is one of the worst teams in the league against shooting guards, so I think Gary Harris is a phenomenal play. I do like to pair Gary Harris with Jokic a lot, so keep that in mind. Avery Bradley has 61. The price is right. His minutes have been up, 34 minutes in 3 straight contests. Finally had a big game against Washington after struggling to get going a little bit. I think Bradley is very interesting, even with IT2 back. Tim Hardaway Jr., 5,900. I'm not anything I'm too excited about. His minutes should be up with Bazemore out. Him and Thabo have been switching, rotating a little bit, so certainly an option. Fournier 5,800, interesting. KCP at 56 is interesting. Nobody that really, neither of those guys really get me going, but they're certainly interesting. Thabo at 4,300 is an interesting value play. He's the one that had the big game. Everybody was on Prince the other day. He was the one that actually had the big game. He was 3,900, went off for 30.5 DraftKings points, while that guy Prince really did nothing all day. Certainly somebody to consider. I wouldn't be surprised to see him come up as chalk today because there's not a lot of naked value. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him chalky. And in tournaments, if he's going to be the chalk, he might be somebody you can fade just because his minutes are not secure. If they need to put Hardaway in there, or Hardaway and Prince in there for any reason, there's a rotation going on there. His minutes aren't exactly secure. That's all I'm trying to say. Anyway, moving on to small forward. We talked about Giannis and Butler. Paul George, 8,300. Playing against a team that he was rumored to be traded to, coming off a big game against Utah. He's going to have some Crowder defense. I'm not crazy about the price in this spot. Now, I like Paul George. I think he's a great player. I don't think he gets enough respect around the league, but 8,300 is just too much when there are some other options. We talked about Barton. Gordon Hayward, 7,400, coming off a massive game. This is a great spot for him. However, he is coming off a pretty big game, so it's he played 37 minutes against Indiana, 50.75 DraftKings points, and Rodney Hood did come back. That was kind of his homecoming. He shot 24 shots in that game. That's not something Gordon's been doing. 16, 14, 17. He doesn't typically shoot 24 shots these days, not unless there's injuries. So I'm a little concerned that he may not be able to hit that again because his peripherals aren't the greatest. He doesn't get too many assists or rebounds. He does get some blocks and steals occasionally, but you can't really rely on that. Although he is playing a bad Knicks team, so maybe he can. But 7,400 is interesting. Covington, 73, is going to see some Roberson defense, but Covington's a pretty good defender himself, so I think he's worth considering. Melo is super cheap, 6,800 for Carmelo Anthony, a guy that the last time he played, which is against the Clippers, he was 8,200. He's getting the Utah discount, and he's going to be matched up with Hayward, who I'm not really afraid of with a guy like Melo. Melo's a guy is a jump shooter anyway. Now, Melo's shot attempts have been down over his last few games, but at 6,800, I still think he's interesting. I think that's very, very cheap, even with KP back and everything. If Melo happens to get you 40, you're loving life. Chris Middleton, 6,200, certainly in play. Otto Porter in play. Jay Crowder. Small forward is not so bad. Now, one thing I think is ridiculous. Taurean Prince I know he was super chalky last time. So even he was 3,500. He only got 17.5 DraftKings points. That's it. And now all of a sudden he's 5K. That's ridiculous. I don't understand why he's 5K. I think that's just crazy. And I can't do that. There's no way I could pay up for that guy like that. Anyway, moving on to power forward. You got Kevin Love, 7,800. His minutes, it looks like he played 26 against the Lakers. That's probably the highest I would expect. Now, he did score 42.25 DraftKings points in that limited amount of time. He still shot 15 shots. He got 15 rebounds against the Lakers. With Jokic down there, I might take away some of the rebounds, but he's got the upside. Dario Saric, 76. I love Saric. I don't see anybody really stopping him. Unless he has to play center a lot. He could have a tough time with Cantor and Adams. But overall, I like Saric a lot. Let me see. Marvin Williams at 64. He's still been playing pretty well. He's kind of come back down to earth a little bit. He's not exactly putting up those 50-point games, but he's been consistently breaking 30. Over 33 out of his last 4 for sure. KP against Utah. They don't have Favors, so they might have So KP's in an interesting spot. He's coming off a big game against the Clippers despite his team getting completely destroyed. I guess they didn't lose all that bad, but still, they did lose decently. Melo was out for a lot of that. Melo didn't play that much, so keep that in mind. I know I mentioned considering Melo. For whatever reason, he didn't get that much run against the Clippers, so keep that in mind because Porzingis apparently, he was left him some opportunities. Porzingis had a couple good games in a row before defaulting against Indiana, but he's worth considering. Just keep that in mind. Willie Cauley-Stein, his price is up, but he's still in play against Milwaukee. Milwaukee is bad against bigs. Tobias Harris is coming off a decent game. Markieff is at an interesting spot with no Millsap in there. Frank the Tank is fairly cheap. Aaron Gordon. Ilyasova is 5.5. We know without Millsap, he's the guy that gets the run. I would much prefer to play Ersan over Taurean Prince for only $500 more, I'd tell you that. Taj Gibson, 44, is going to have a tougher matchup. Fareed kind of really burnt me, but at 4,700, you could still consider him. I'm just concerned about his minutes. Scal Labreser, I don't know. He came out of nowhere, had a monster game. If Sacramento continues to be banged up, you might have to consider him as well. One guy I wanted to mention is Thad Young. Thaddeus Young is 4,600 on DraftKings, and Boston has struggled against power forwards all season. Thad Young's minutes have been up there. Now, he still hasn't exactly had that ceiling game that we've seen earlier in the season, but in 2 games against Boston, he's averaging 35.3 FanDuel points. So for value at 4,600, he's somebody I'm definitely considering, even though I'm not crazy about rostering him in general. I'm definitely thinking about going there. Mirotic at 4,600, also an option. Detroit traditionally has struggled against stretch fours. I did skip over a few people. Reggie Jackson, the point guard, is interesting. Jamal Murray is interesting against Cleveland. Obviously, LeBron is the obvious at 11-1 at small forward. Mirotic, 46, and Thad Young. Oladipo's in a pretty good spot against Philly. Those were all guys that didn't pop up on my list right away, but those are guys worth mentioning. Moving on to center, we've got Jokic. He's 10K, which his price actually came down, and it makes sense since he hasn't really been hitting his ceiling. But I love it. If the game's gonna stay close, I love the Joker and a GPP flyer. I love doing a game stack here in this game particularly. But Jokic is probably my favorite center as usual. Drummond's 7,900, pretty good matchup against Chicago, who should be without Robin Lopez. Vooch at 79, he's just a usage monster. Rudy Gobert, 7.7, great spot against the Knicks. Great price against the Knicks. I know the Knicks are horrible at center, so I love that spot. Howard, 7K without Millsap, should get some decent usage. Al Horford against Indiana is very interesting. He's been coming around lately. Holmes, we don't know if he's playing. He's 6,200. That's too much for me against Adams and Cantor. Plumlee against Cleveland's interesting, but I don't know how much he'll play because of Kevin Love. I don't think Plumlee could cover Love on the perimeter. Miles Turner is interesting against Boston. He's cheap enough, that's for sure. Greg Monroe, 5,300 against Sacramento. I don't think I'm going to go there. I love Cantor at 5,100, and I love Adams at 5. It's a matter of which one. I prefer Cantor, I think, because he gets more usage, though. But either one of those guys are interesting. Willie Herman Gomez is down to 48, but I'm not going there because I'm not going up against Gobert, I'll tell you that. Let me see. And for value, guys, I'm looking for, obviously we talked about Felicio. He's 3K, which is the minimum. Decent matchup against Detroit. I mean, I would expect Drummond to eat here, but at the same time, if he's going to get minutes, it's interesting. And of course, if he can't go, then Joffrey becomes a lock. Joffrey Laverne, he becomes a lock. But obviously, Felicio has been the main backup, so I would expect him to get the minutes. All right, that's going to do it for us today. Had to get through it. I'm a little ill. That's why I was kind of all over the place, but did my best for you guys. If you're not a member of WiseTake.com, please sign up at WiseTake.com. Membership is free. You get access to our free projection tools, a couple other cool things. More importantly, our forums, and in the future, a Slack chat that we're going to try to open for you guys. Try to build a community. If you're watching this on YouTube, please hit that like button. I really appreciate it. This is why I wake up doing this sick, because I care what you guys think, and I want to make the show successful. So by hitting that like button, you're showing me you appreciate the show, and then we're doing a good job here. If you're listening on Podbean, give us a follow. Listening on iTunes, subscribe to the channel. Please give us some feedback. Rank us a little bit. We have no rankings on the Podbean, but I know people are on the iTunes, but I know people are watching. So if you're one of the people that listen on iTunes, give us a follow. I mean, obviously subscribe to the channel, and then of course leave us some reviews, good or bad. I just want to hear some feedback to make the show as good as possible. Guys, don't forget, we're going to have Fuego Steve on tomorrow's podcast, and also WiseTakeLIVE tonight at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss it. It's going to be an awesome show. We'll get some stuff done. Anyway, guys, as always, good luck.
Yeah.